Check, check, check. My check. Testing 1, 2. Check, check, check. Testing. Check, check, check. My check. Check, check, check. My check. Testing 1, 2, 3. Yeah, sounds good. Mic check. Check, check, check. Mic check. This is mic number 1. Check, check, check. Mic check. Testing 1, 2, 3. Mic check number 3. Check, check, check. Mic check. Mic number 4. Check, check, check. Mic number 5. Check, check. Mic 6. Check, check, check. Mic 7. Check, check, check. Mic 8. Check, check, check. Mic check.
Other off.
Okay, we're ready. At this time, I'd like to call the inquiry and hearing and establish that there is a quorum present in which all members of council are present. Mr. Gonzalez was notice served to Councilman Homer Hassel. Okay. Mr. David Flores, you are the attorney representing Mr. Jasso? That's correct. Did you receive notice of the inquiry and the hearing? Yes, we did. Okay. Mr. Flores, I assure that Mr. Jasso pleads not guilty to the charge? That's correct. Okay. We're going to start with a hearing. At this time, I'd like to use the invoke rule and see if any witnesses, Mr. Gonzalez.
You have two witnesses. City Manager Jasso.
Okay, no.
Those are the only witnesses.
Mr. Gonzalez, counsel for the city, are you ready?
Yes, I am. Present.
Mr. Flores, counsel for Mr. Homer Jasso Jr., are you ready?
Present.
Mr. Gonzalez, go ahead and proceed with calling your first witness.
Okay. Your Honor, at this time, the city would offer into evidence Exhibit 1.
Would you hold on real quick? There was some, I guess, some confusion on the certification of public notice. Did we have to certify the meeting?
Yes, the notice was posted where the city posted on the website and also outside the city hall.
Okay. So it was posted in accordance with the Texas Open Meetings Act,
Yes,
being that we do have a quorum for the hearing.
that is correct.
Okay.
All right.
If that's the case, we'll go ahead and proceed. Go ahead.
Okay. At this time, Your Honor, I'd like to offer into evidence our city's inquiry exhibit number 1. Provided opposing counsel with the exhibits that we intend to use in this hearing. Unless there's an objection, I'd ask this time that it be offered and admitted.
I would object only to the extent that we previously of documents that with the brief review of the documents just provided to me and just provided to me. Mayor, I would object only to the extent that we had previously requested through a proper public information request, all documents that were going to be used today at this hearing in support of the city's inquiry. Based on a brief review of the documents that I've seen, there are some there that were not provided to me. To that extent, and subject to my identification of those documents, I would object.
And my response to that, Your Honor, is that yesterday we faxed these 68 documents out to opposing counsel. You received it.
Again, I did not receive that fax. I had received a packet last week previously, and there's several documents that are contained in this exhibit that I did not receive.
Could you please show them to me, Mr. Flores?
Again, and this is just a brief review, Mayor, and this was just provided I can see already. Again, I would, subject to maybe later identifying which ones, but
What I propose is, why don't he object as if we use any of these documents during the hearing, he can object at that time, and then the court can rule.
I would agree with that procedure.
Okay, let's proceed.
At this time,
This is red. You got a blue.
may I proceed, Your Honor?
Go ahead.
Just by way of background, these, the exhibits that you have been provided were subpoenaed. The first subpoena was served on the City Secretary, Myra Garza, and the exhibits are included in that, and itemized in the list. The first item that is the authority for this council to review council member Jasso's actions relating to a contract with the city. That contract will be provided in some of the other documents that will follow up. We requested the oath of office, which Councilman Jasso swore to preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution and the laws of the state of Texas. In addition, our Code of Ordinance also provides that he has to swear that he will uphold the ordinances of the city of Edinburg and also its charter. We requested any record relating to conflicts of interest, affidavits filed by council members on any items that were on the agenda. None was found according to the response that we have there. Garza Exhibit E is the budget for the city of Edinburg for 2016-2017. And you will note on the screen there, under...
I may reject that as one of the documents that was...
Okay, and our response to that, Your Honor, is that we provided these documents via email yesterday to him.
Overruled.
Yes, a
Go ahead and
request.
proceed.
All right,
My objection noted.
Yes, sir.
okay. And one of the items on there is tire disposal. It's a line item of $25,000. Garza Exhibit G are certified minutes of the meeting of September 6, 2016. And that was a meeting where the council considered the budget for the year. On page 20 of the exhibit, you will note that there was one item that was pulled out of the regular agenda, and it dealt with Vida, in which Mayor Garcia abstained. As I understand it, his wife worked for the program. At that meeting, Councilmember Jasso made a motion to approve the budget for Vida, which was seconded by Councilmember J.R. Betancourt. The only member abstaining was Mayor Richard Garcia. Garza Exhibit 1 deals with a certificate of formation of a limited liability corporation filed by Santa Anita Recycling LLC, one of the managers being Edward Johnson, Homer Jasso, and Beatriz Vega Piñera. The date of the formation of that corporation is noted on there as April the 2nd, 2016. It was also executed by Commissioner Jasso. Exhibit JW-9 is a W-9 form filed by Santa Anita Reclamation Project LLC. Exhibit K is incidentally, the previous exhibit was filed on October 29th, 2012. Garza Exhibit K is a W-9 filed by Santa Anita Recycling. The date on that document is July the 12th, 2016. At this time, we'd call Ramiro Gomez. Mr. Gomez,
Please proceed.
you'll need to be sworn in, Your Honor. Stand in front of him.
Got to swear you in. Raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear or affirm that you will tell the truth and nothing but the truth, so help me God? Okay.
Would you please state your name for the record?
My name is Ramiro L. Gomez Jr.
And how are you employed by the city of Edinburg?
I'm the Director of Solid Waste.
And how long have you served in that capacity?
I have been there since 2000, June of 2000, so over 18 years.
Okay. Were you acquainted with the bidding out of the recycling the tires?
Yes, I was.
And when was that request for proposal sent out?
It was sent out in the beginning of September, going into the 16, 17 year,
Okay.
or the 15, 16 year, and then the 16, 17
Okay.
year.
I don't know if you can look at your exhibit, Exhibit A, and see if you can identify what that is. It's also up on the screen if you can see that.
Exhibit 8 is a purchase requisition that's
Okay.
submitted.
And that was submitted by whom?
That was submitted by the department and signed by me.
And who was the bidder on that?
The bidder was Santa Anita Reclamation.
Okay. And you're acquainted with them?
I was acquainted with them, yes.
Yeah. Who did you deal with when you dealt with Santa Anita Reclamation?
I have dealt with several people, starting with Lance Walker and several different operators.
Okay. And the date of this purchase request is what?
It's December 22 of 2015.
And they were the bidder that who was accepted, is that correct?
That is correct.
And the amount of the bid was what?
The amount of the bid, we issued a purchase requisition for $14,100.
Okay. And that's important because the amount was not 15,000, right?
That is correct.
If it had been 15,000, it would have gone to council?
That is correct.
What is Exhibit B?
Exhibit B is a check requisition to Santa Anita Recycling.
Okay. And what's it dated?
The date on this one is 10/27 of 2016.
Right. And it has a vendor number on the left-hand corner? Is that correct?
On the top, yes, it is 44271.
All right. And that's to identify the vendor being, in this case, Santa Anita Reclamation, is that correct?
The vendor number at this time would identify Santa Anita Reclamation, if that was the one that was issued to it.
Okay. And Exhibit C, what is that?
Exhibit C is the purchase requisition submitted for the following year of the 2016-2017 year.
Okay. And the vendor on there is?
The vendor here is Santa Anita Recycling.
Right. And the date of this request is what?
It's 10/25 of 2016,
And the vendor number?
44271.
Okay. So you've got two purchase orders with two different companies having the same vendor number and the same date, is that correct?
On the same date.
Yes.
On this date of 10/25/2016, the vendor number 44271 identifies Santa Anita Recycling, yes.
Okay. And that's the same vendor number as Santa Anita Reclamation, is that correct?
Back issued, if I can go back to the first exhibit, I think it's Exhibit A for the requisition issued at 12/22/2015. Vendor number 44271 was for Santa Anita Reclamation, yes.
So it's the same vendor number.
Yes.
But you're dealing with a different company, right?
Yes, sir.
Exhibit D, what is that?
Exhibit B,
D. It says City of Edinburg release order.
sorry, Rick, there's Exhibit D, I have nothing.
Okay. Can you see the exhibit up there or not?
That is a release order signed by me to
Okay.
release funds from the requisition.
Okay. Is the date on that invoice April the 13th, 2015?
I don't, I can't see the position.
Can you approach the podium?
Sure.
And maybe it'd be easier for him to testify from here too. What is that?
This is a check, this is an actual release order for an invoice dated 4/13, invoice number 2.
All right, and the vendor number?
The vendor number released on that is 44271.
Okay, and the vendor?
The vendor there is stated as Santa Anita Recycling.
Okay, and the date?
The date of that invoice is 4/13/2015.
Okay, now that's probably a typo.
That is a typo,
All
correct?
right. It was received by the city when?
It was received in 2016, prior to,
What's the date on there?
that's received, that is stamped by finance as when it was received at finance at May the 2nd, 2016.
Okay.
And it was signed by me on 5/2/2016.
And what is this, Exhibit E?
Exhibit E is another release order by the department releasing on invoices 2016-6-2-01 that was submitted on 6/21, and then another one on 6/21 for invoice 2016-6-21-01.
Okay, and this is filed by Santa Anita?
The invoice was, filed by Santa Anita Recycling.
Okay, and the
Vendor
vendor?
number 44271.
It's still the same vendor number, right?
Correct.
All right, and the invoice date on this is what?
It's 6/21/2016.
Were you aware that Santa Anita Recycling was doing business with the city at that point?
No.
Okay, Exhibit E. Well, let's go to this one here. What is this here?
It's a memorandum from myself to Mr. Alonso, the purchasing director, where I was requesting the closure of the open requisition, and that all the invoicing that we had received up till that point had gone over by $301.37.
Okay, that means it was over $15,000 when you add up all the invoices?
I don't believe so, sir. No.
It was not?
No, because the requisition was for 14,100, and then it gone over for $301.37, so bringing the total for 14,401.37.
And the subject of this memo was whom?
It's Santa Anita Recycling.
So at this point, they've got a contract with the city somehow?
At this point, no, but they had already changed the vendor identification.
Okay. What is this here, Exhibit B?
Exhibit B, there is an invoice from Santa Anita Recycling.
And the date?
The date, 8/21/2016,
Okay.
invoice number 10.
At that point, you know, the city is got a contract with Santa Anita Recycling?
On 8/21, I don't believe that there was a contract or anything, is that we were already underway for bidding, and we were still taking tires over for disposal, so there was invoices created, and we were paying on those invoices while we established a new purchase.
Do you know if the bid provided whether or not this contract could be assigned to another vendor?
It does not provide for us an
Okay.
assignment.
And did you know that the city, that the bid required the city to authorize an assignment?
Yes.
And did you ever see any such request for assignment?
No, other than the W-9 that was submitted towards the end of that requisition dates, no, there was no other previous request.
We had also requested when we served you with subpoena for copies of any emails or text messages
Correct.
Did you find any of those?
No, sir. Everything that we found, we submitted.
All right, I'll pass the witness.
Mr. Flores, do you wish to present any testimony or introduce any documentary evidence?
I only wish to cross-examine on the information currently provided.
Okay. Do you have any witnesses that you'd like to?
I do have some witnesses I would like to present in our affirmative defenses. However, I would like the opportunity to cross-examine this particular witness.
Okay.
Thank you. Mr. Gomez.
Hold on, you still realize you're still under oath,
Yes,
correct? Okay.
Thank you. Mr. Gomez, you've been the Director of Solid Waste since June of 2000.
Correct, sir.
When did the City of Edinburg begin to do business with Santa Anita Reclamation?
On and off, we've done business with Santa Anita and other tire recyclings throughout my tenure here.
So when you started working on or about June of 2000, the City of Edinburg was already doing business with Santa Anita Reclamation, is that correct?
We were doing business with either Santa Anita or other tire recyclings. I cannot.
Starting back then, as far as your dealings with Santa Anita Reclamation, who were you dealing with?
I believe it was Lance Walker.
Who's Lance Walker?
He at that time was the owner-operator of Santa Anita Reclamation.
And since that time till the contract was terminated, had you been dealing with Santa Anita Reclamation specifically with Lance Walker?
Rephrase that question as far as what contract? What
Contract for tire disposal?
Any specific contract or just this one?
As if, when you were doing business for tire disposal with Santa Anita Reclamation, when you were dealing with that company, was it always dealings with Lance Walker?
No.
Who else?
There were different operators that he would hire to operate the facility,
None of which was Mr. Jasso Jr., is that correct?
none of which were Mr.
There was a document that you discussed, and it was a bid that you mentioned was for years from September 15 to 2016, is that correct?
That's correct.
Who did you deal with in response to the bid submitted by Santa Anita Reclamation?
Off the top of my head, without having the document in front of me, it was a gentleman from Mexico.
When discussing or dealing with that specific bid, did at any time you deal with Mr. Jasso Jr.?
No, I dealt with Luis Reyes.
Excuse me?
Luis Reyes.
Who is Luis Reyes?
He was the operator.
The
For
operator?
that particular bid, the operator was Luis Reyes, away from the Mexican national.
Is it true that Luis Reyes purchased Santa Anita Reclamation from Lance Walker?
I cannot attest to that, sir. I was told that he purchased Santa Anita Reclamation, but as far as I know.
Once you started doing business with Luis Reyes, did you enter into a separate contract with him? Or did you continue under the same contract with Santa Anita Reclamation?
We continued with Santa Anita Reclamation because that was the project awarded.
Was there an assignment in that case?
No.
You discussed a budget item wherein there was a budget for $25,000. I don't recall which exhibit it was, but there was a budget item for tire disposal for $25,000. Is that correct?
I believe the item that was presented into evidence, yes, a copy of the fiscal year budget.
That's not to say that you paid Santa Anita Reclamation for tire disposal services $25,000 in that given period, is it?
No, that just goes through the projection of what we had for that given time frame for the year.
In fact, because you didn't pay up to $25,000, in fact, you paid less than $15,000 in that year, 15 to 16 for tire disposal
15,
services.
16, we closed out less than 15,000, correct?
And what, to your knowledge, is the significance of a contract coming in under $15,000?
According to our policies and procedures, if we're gonna award a contract or a bid that comes up over $15,000, it requires city council approval.
And if it's under $15,000, it does not require council approval, is that correct?
That is correct.
And as you testified, that given year, the contract was Under 15, correct?
Our projections showed that there was gonna be under 15,000.
So it was not presented specifically to the city council for
No,
approval?
it was not.
Now, did you ever deal with Mr. Homer Hassel Jr. with regard to the tire disposal services?
No, I did not.
You ever have any conversation with Mr. Homer Hassel Jr. with regard to tire disposal services?
Specifically, no. There was no specific conversations on and off. There were probably conversations that he would have asked about tires or whatever, but not specifically about Santa Anita Reclamation and him.
And you had those conversations with Mr. Hassel Jr.?
I cannot speak to a specific conversation, but conversations on and off with council or any members of the city, you know, about what we're doing with tires or whatever, that could have occurred.
Do you know, as you sit here today, whether or not Mr. Homer Hassel Jr. had any interest in Santa Anita Reclamation?
That I know specifically, no.
As you sit here today, do you know whether or not Mr. Homer Hassel Jr. had any interest in Santa Anita Recycling?
Specifically at the point in time, no.
At the point in time, at any time?
After disclosure, then I knew that he had interest in it, but prior to that, I did not have any personal knowledge that he had interest in the company.
You said after disclosure. What do you mean by that?
After we were notified that he had come to the city and had filed paperwork that he had interest in the.
You received information to indicate that Homer Hassel actually went to the city to disclose an interest that he had obtained in this tire disposal company?
That is correct.
How did you find out about that?
I believe it was city attorney.
I'm sorry?
It was the city attorney.
And he approached you to notify you of that?
He approached us, yes,
And what specifically was stated by him to you?
that he had filed paperwork disclosing that he had an interest in the tire company.
And did the city attorney inform you at that time that it was a violation for Mr. Homer Hassel to be doing business with the city of Edinburg?
I cannot say that. No.
Did he,
No, the city attorney did not. advise
Sustained.
us.
were there any complaints either by the city attorney or anyone about Homer Hassel doing business with the city through the tire disposal company that you're aware of?
Sir, that's beyond my pay grade. He wouldn't have told me anything on that.
Did you ever tell Mr. Homer Hassel Jr. that it was a violation of the city charter for him to do business with the city?
Not that, no.
Were you aware of that provision?
I was not aware of that, no, sir.
Did you ever go and tell anybody else, hey, Homer here is a council member and he's doing business with the city of Edinburg?
Not ever recall having that conversation with anyone.
To the best of your knowledge, Homer took every effort to disclose that interest, is that correct?
As far as I can remember, yes.
That's a witness.
I have some follow-up. Ramiro, when was the first conversation you had with Council Member Hassel regarding recycling the tires?
I believe we were having lunch in a restaurant where I was invited by the vendor to come in and discuss certain issues about tire recycling throughout the valley. The conversations were going back and forth. Multiple conversations were ongoing. At that point, I believe that there were some statements or interests that were discussed, in which I notified Councilmember Hassel that he needed to talk to the boss about it.
Okay, so when was that?
I believe it was late June, early July,
Oh.
when we had,
Of what year?
I believe of 2016, going into 2017,
How did,
or
how
2016.
did Commissioner Hassel contact you? How did he contact you? Was it by phone or was he?
He didn't contact me. He was actually at the restaurant when we
Oh.
arrived.
And he asked you what?
I don't recall the specific statements or questions that he was asking. I think like I stated earlier, there were multiple conversations going on between myself and Mr.
Okay.
Johnson and Mr. Reyes.
Yeah.
So
But in particular to Council Member Hassel, he inquired about tire recycling or what?
he was inquiring about the overall just tires, and the different processes that were used for recycling and stuff like that. And I believe that he was just asking general questions to myself and, how we could go on or, grow the company and stuff like that.
Okay.
That I can recall. I don't remember specifics of the conversations, but I did.
And did you know that by that point he was already operating a recycling company?
No, sir.
no documentation or any evidence that at the time that he was any interest.
Well, there were billings that we've introduced so far.
Do not prove any ownership.
Overruled, go ahead and proceed.
This particular bid, aside from not having a provision that it wasn't supposed to be assigned to another contractor, where was the delivery of the tires supposed to be made to?
It was made to Santa Anita Reclamation on,
Okay.
in North Edinburg.
Okay. Would you be surprised to know that the bid itself, when it went out, was not, the delivery was supposed to be pickup at the waste?
We sent out the bid to do a pickup, but normally we can get into some issues with the state of having more than 300 to 500 tires on the ground. So because of that, sometimes we do elect to move the tires so we don't get into regulatory issues.
Okay.
So those are just operational calls that I make or that we make in general, just to move the tires and not to get into regulatory issues.
And you mentioned on cross-examination that there was a filing of an affidavit or something by Councilmember Jasso?
I believe that's when he disclosed to city attorney.
Okay, and when was that, do you know?
I do not have a recollection of that.
I'll pass the witness.
Go ahead, proceed.
Mr. Gomez, do you have any knowledge with regard to the agreements or the nature of the transaction between Santa Anita Reclamation and Santa Anita Recycling?
No, sir, I do not.
Do you agree that Mr. Hassel was not trying to conceal his interest in Santa Anita Recycling?
At the time of that meeting, where we were at the restaurant, I don't believe he was concealing anything. He was just general questions and that were going back and forth. I did respond that whatever questions he had in regards to that, they needed to go to the city manager and the city attorney.
And to the best of your knowledge, the city attorney had been informed of this interest, correct?
At the time that he did his disclosure, I believe so.
That's what it's.
I have no further questions. We're done.
Mr. Chon, I'm going to swear you in. Raise your right hand. Do you affirm to solemnly swear and affirm that you will tell the truth and nothing but the truth, so help me God? Go ahead and take a seat.
May I proceed with questioning?
Go ahead.
Would you please state your name for the record?
Ascension Alonso.
And how are you employed by the city of Edinburg?
I'm the Director of Finance.
Okay. And how long have you been Director of Finance?
I've been since November of 1997.
Okay. And what is it that you do around here?
Anything having to do with finance, pretty much.
Make sure the bills get paid?
Correct.
So if a vendor submits a bill after it's been reviewed and approved, you issue a check.
That is correct.
If you look at Alonso Exhibit A, what is that?
That's the bid that went out.
Okay, and that is the bid that's the subject of this hearing?
Yes.
And it went out when?
It went out. That bid went out.
If you'll turn the page, it says it on there. I believe it went out on Monday, October the 19th, 2015.
Okay. Yes.
Okay.
Let me make sure. That bid went out October 2nd and
Okay.
re-advertised on the 9th in 2015.
All right. And the bids were due October the 19th, 2015. Is that correct?
That is correct.
What is Exhibit B? Alonso Exhibit B.
That's an email that we received from Ms. Linda Cardenas with Solid Waste Management.
And who's she? What does she do there?
I think she's the administrative, help with the administration. I don't know her exact title.
Okay, and what is the subject of that email?
This was a request that had been forwarded from Mr. Ramiro Gomez through Ms. Linda Cardenas as far as changing the vendor name.
What do you mean changing the vendor name?
The request was that the check, we had issued a check, and it was made to Santa Ana Reclamation. The request was to change it to Santa Ana Recycling.
Do you know who made that request?
It was made by Ms. Linda Cardenas, but it was an email forwarded from Mr. Gomez.
Okay. Anybody at finance question why a check is being issued to Santa Anita Recycling?
The reissue was questioned by my accounts payable clerk because the PO had been originally bidded by Santa Anita Reclamation.
Right. Was that the first that you had heard that Santa Anita Recycling was now in charge of disposing of tires?
That is correct.
And what is exhibit, Alonso Exhibit C?
That is a copy of the PO 160484.
Okay, and it is issued to whom, or issued by whom?
Issued to Santa Anita Reclamation Project LLC.
Okay. And what is the date up on the right-hand corner?
January 20th, 2016.
And the amount of the contract was,
$14,100.
so because of that amount, that item did not go to council, is that correct?
That is correct.
What is Alonso Exhibit D?
Those are copies of the invoices submitted.
Okay, and who submitted that billing?
That was submitted, the vendor was Santa Anita Recycling LLC.
Okay, and what is the date of that invoice?
June 21st, 2015, 2016, I mean.
What is Exhibit E?
Exhibit E. Those are copies of checks issued.
And what is the date of those checks?
We have several.
Okay.
The first one is July 1st, 2016. We have one issued on July 28th, 2016.
Okay, the July 1st is issued to whom?
Could you repeat that again, please?
To whom is the July 1st?
July 1st was Santa Anita Reclamation Project, LLC.
All right, and then the July 20-something, you said?
The next one, July 28th, Santa Anita Recycling, LLC.
Okay, and it's dated, what date?
July 28th, 2016.
Okay. Is there a note on there, on your exhibit? Actually, I'm sorry.
Yes, it says, no reissue manual check as per solid waste management for 7/28/16 instead of 7/29/16.
Okay, and that was done why?
Reason for that, we had scheduled this check to be run on a Friday, which would have been July 29th. There was a request by the department to issue a manual check on that Thursday, which was the 28th. So the check was already in the system, so we had to reissue and void the one that was already in the system.
And what is Alonso Exhibit F?
That's also copies of the checks.
Okay, and what's the first check on there?
7/1/2016, check number 90337,
And it's made out to whom?
Santa Anita Reclamation Project, LLC.
All right, may Mr. Alonso approach the podium?
Yes, sir. Go ahead.
Showing you what's been marked as Alonso Exhibit F, and what is that?
That's a check issued on 5/6/2016 for $7,808.85.
And is issued to whom?
Santa Anita Reclamation.
Mr. Gomez testified a while ago about a disclosure form. What is Exhibit, Alonso Exhibit G?
That's a Form CIS. That's a local government officer's conflict disclosure statement.
Okay. And normally, who does that get filed with?
That gets filed with our city secretary's department.
Where was this received? Or by whom was this received?
By the legal department.
And what date is the date that it was received?
This September 22nd, 2016.
That's subsequent to checks that were made out to him in July, is that correct?
That is correct.
It shows been marked as Alonso Exhibit H. What is that?
That's a check, check number, can't see, 90241, issued on 12/2/2016, for,
Can you tell who it's made out to?
Santa Anita Reclamation.
Okay. And that is a check that was issued in the 2016-2017 fiscal year, is that correct?
That is correct.
There's some other checks that are attached to this exhibit. What is this check here?
That's check number 97797, 1,600.69, issued to Santa Anita Recycling.
There's a check issued here on Exhibit E, Alonso Exhibit. What is the date of this check?
May 6, 2016,
And the amount is how much?
$7,808.65.
And it's made out to whom?
Santa Anita Reclamation Project LLC.
Okay, still in Exhibit E. There's a check made out here on what date?
7/29/2016,
And the amount?
$7,808.65.
And the vendor?
Vendor, Santa Anita Recycling LLC.
Can you make out this check here?
Santa Anita Recycling LLC,
Okay. And the date on that check?
and that one I can make.
Okay. I'll pass this witness.
May?
Yes, Mr. Alonso, you do realize you're still under oath, correct?
Yes, sir.
Go ahead,
Thank
Mr.
you,
Flores.
Thank you, Mayor. Mr. Alonso, did Mr. Homer Jasso Jr. ever attempt to influence you to do something you felt was inappropriate?
No, never.
Did Mr. Homer Jasso Jr. ever come and ask you to issue a check directly to him?
No,
Did he ever approach you to discuss this issue with the tire disposal service?
no, sir.
You had no discussions with him, is that correct?
No, sir.
Now, you discussed a disclosure form that was Exhibit F, I believe?
Yes.
And was this document brought to you?
It was brought to my purchasing agent.
When was that?
I think it was September 22nd, that same day, 2016.
Do you know who brought it to you?
It was Ms. Blanca Rodriguez from Legal Department.
Now, when you received requests to reissue checks, and when this disclosure form was brought to you, did you ever contact the legal department to inquire as to what was going on?
No, we didn't. My accounting payable clerk was the one that brought it to my attention that they wanted to change the name of the company. And we did request that there was a change in name only, that we needed a W-9 to be able to send a 1099 at the end of the year.
Did you feel there was anything inappropriate about that process?
No, sir.
Were you concerned at all about that process?
No, sir.
Do you know, or do you have any information as to when Mr. Homer Hasso Jr. approached the city to disclose his interest in this business?
My understanding was when it was brought to council to be put on an agenda item by our city manager.
Did you ever have discussions with city council about Mr. Hasso's interest in this company?
No.
When you received, there was an email that we discussed, introduced. I believe it's Exhibit B, dated July 21, 2016, from Dalinda Cardenas. Do you recall that email?
Yes,
He's asking you to reissue a check, is that correct?
that is correct.
Did you contact council or legal at this point?
No,
Do you think there was anything inappropriate about the request?
no, sir.
Pass the witness.
Mr. Alonso, will you come back to the podium? So it
Sure.
shows the documents we could not read. That clear? Can you read that or not?
7/28/2016 to exactly,
Okay.
7,808.
Could you speak into the mic, Mr. Alonso? I know that.
Okay. Yes, it was a check issued to Santa Anita Recycling LLC for $7,808.65, issued on 7/28/2016.
Yeah. You actually have the back end, the back part of the check, is that correct?
That is correct.
All right, and it was signed. Can you make out the signature?
It's kind of a little blurry, but it looks like it by Mr. Hasso, it looks like.
Okay, I'll show you, it's been marked as Garza Exhibit C, and what is that?
This is the name and the authority of the State of Texas Oath of Office,
And it's signed by?
by Mr. Hasso.
All right. I know you're not an expert, but those
No.
signatures appear the same?
Looks similar, yes.
In terms of this contract, you've heard testimony that the bid was not supposed to be assigned, or the contract was not supposed to be assigned. Normally, what would happen if finance or legal discovers that a contract has been assigned to another vendor?
We usually don't assign to another
To the extent, Mayor, that that's better time when the court reviews.
Well,
Overruled, but I'm going to ask, so you can get better at a mic. It's hard to hear you, so.
In terms of the job that you do here, one of the things that you do is, you know policies relating to purchasing?
That's correct.
Okay. Contract work, you review probably thousands of contracts a year,
That is correct.
and bids.
Correct.
You review these contracts so that they conform with whatever bid went out.
Yes,
Okay. And you've heard testimony, you've seen documents that this bid was not supposed to be assigned to another contractor. Normally, what's a process when that occurs, when a bid is assigned to another contractor?
usually it's questioned and brought to our city manager. What we do then is, if it's a different company, we usually end up avoiding the purchase order, or if a city manager okays us to go forward with the change, it goes to legal so we can check all the documents. As far as ownership, that's not something that we do in the finance department. We're not experts at that, but we do run it through our city manager and our legal department as to changing a contract from one to the other.
Okay. And you didn't see any type of document that was presented to you reflecting that Santanita Reclamation had assigned this contract to Santanita Recycling, is that correct?
No, the only thing we saw was a W-9 for the change of the vendor name.
And no one questioned why they were getting a W-9 from an entity that did not have a contract with the city?
At the time, we had our accounts payable clerk in training. Usually when we get a different W-9 or a W-9 to change the ownership, we do verify the ID number, their employer ID number or their company ID number. At the time, my employee did not check that, but it was not something we questioned at the time, because it was just the request from the department was to change the vendor name, not the company. And they use the same vendor for that particular reason.
Are you involved in the budgeting process?
Yes, sir.
You present during the budget meetings? the
Yes,
city
sir.
has? Council? You're also present when the budget gets approved?
Yes, sir.
Are you acquainted with a form that must be required by any council member to be filed prior to voting on the budget?
As far as the form or the?
Yes. The conflict
No.
of interest form?
Yes, and the budget process, I'm not familiar with that, but as far as doing any business with the city, yes.
If a council member has a conflict of interest on any item that's on an agenda, or in this case in a budget, do they have to file a conflict of interest form with the city secretary?
Yes, they are required to do that, yes.
Have you ever seen one filed by Mr. Jasso, other than the one that was filed on September of 2016?
No, sir.
And that form that was filed in 2016, that's a form that's required by the state, is that correct?
That is correct,
Okay. In fact, it's on their website, on the state website.
correct.
The form that I'm talking about, a conflict of interest, that deals with a form that's required under our charter.
Correct.
I'll pass a witness.
Go ahead. Mr. Alonso, you stated that when you received the W-9 asking or requesting that you change the vendor name, you did not contact legal, correct?
That is correct.
And that's because you didn't see a need to contact legal, is that correct?
That is correct.
Why not?
Because the request was to change the vendor name, not to change vendor company, or somebody had bought out the company or had transferred ownership.
And you're not aware of the nature of the transactions between Santa Anita Reclamation Project and Santa Anita Recycling, are you?
That is correct. I do not know.
Is it common for a request to you to be made to change vendor name?
They do make requests. We don't usually approve those, but they do. It is requested time to time.
And you did not, you were not concerned about this request?
No, no, sir.
Now, you discussed the budget, and you said you were involved in the budget process, correct?
That is correct.
You said that you have experience when there is a line item in the budget that requires someone on the council to submit what's called a conflict of interest form?
What I have been familiar with is that they abstain from voting at the time that the budget is being approved. As far as the requirement of the form, is anytime there's a conflict of interest, that they're, my understanding is they're required to disclose that.
Are you familiar with the state laws as to what constitutes a conflict of interest?
Not with the state, I'm not an attorney, no.
Now, if was the tire disposal a specific line item on the budget?
Yes, as far as disposal services, yes,
And that's in general, correct?
that is correct.
Was their contract or any purchase requisitions a specific line item on the budget?
No, sir.
Do you know whether or not Mr. Homer Hauser Jr. was required by law to submit a disclosure of a conflict of interest form?
No, sir.
Pass the witness.
In terms of the change name, you realize that corporations are persons?
I understand that corporations are individuals,
They're individuals.
stockholders and what have you.
Right.
Yes.
And the change of name here was from Santa Anita, they're claiming Santa Anita Reclamation to Santa Anita Recycling.
Correct.
And you didn't believe at the time that this occurred that there was a new company that the city was dealing with?
I didn't believe at the time, correct.
Okay. Now, you didn't deal with any of the owners of either company?
No, sir.
Pass the witness.
Okay. You rest? You rest as well, Mr. Flores? No. Do you have any other witnesses that you'd like to call up to the stand?
I would, but before I do, I would like to submit for your honor and ask this council to take notice of Article 3 of the Edinburg City Charter, specifically Article 3, Section 4, dealing with rules of the city council. And I'd like to read from the city charter, Mayor. Article 3, Section 4 states, "The city council shall be the judge of the election and qualifications of its members, and in such cases shall have the power to subpoena witnesses and compel the production of all pertinent books, records, and papers. But the decision of the city council in any such case shall be subject to review by the courts." This, I'd like to submit, Your Honor.
Thank you.
You have no objection, they previously been
Would like to call at this time Mr. Richard Hinojosa.
Please proceed up here to the front, Mr. Hinojosa, so I can swear you in. On your oath. And you have your right hand raised. Do you solemnly swear or affirm that you will tell the truth and nothing but the truth, so help me God? Yes, sir. Go ahead and have a seat.
Good afternoon. Can you please state your full and complete name?
Yes, my full name is Ricardo M. Hinojosa.
Mr. Hinojosa, what is your current position with the city of
I'm
Edinburg?
city manager for the city of Edinburg.
And when did you begin working as a city manager?
December of 2015.
Prior to your position as a city manager, were you working with the city of Edinburg?
Yes, I was.
In what capacity?
I was director of planning and zoning.
Now, December 2015, you start working as a city manager, correct?
Correct.
In your capacity as a city manager, is it common for city council members to approach you and ask you questions with regard to city rules or city affairs?
Yes,
Now, you're aware that we're here regarding an inquiry into the conduct of Mr. Homer Hauser Jr., correct?
correct.
And specifically as it relates to his interest in a company known as Santa Anita Reclamation, or Recycling, excuse me.
Correct.
Now, did Mr. Homer Hauser at any time approach you to discuss with you his interest in this company?
He approached me to discuss tire recycling.
And when was that?
I think it was in July of 2016.
And what specifically about tire recycling did he approach you to discuss?
He was asking me about the process. He was also saying that he was looking into buying an interest in a company to do tire recycling.
So when he approached you, he hadn't purchased his interest in this company, is that correct?
He gave me no indication that he owned that company.
Now, when he's discussing this issue with you, did he inform you that the company he was seeking to purchase an interest in had already been doing business with the city of Edinburg?
I don't recall if we discussed it in that specific or not, but it was that he was interested in doing business in tire recycling and possibly working here in Edinburgh.
So there was discussions about him, his interest in this company, and about that company doing business with the city of Edinburgh, correct?
He didn't mention names of the company, but he did mention about maybe buying a company or creating a company to actually do business with the city of Edinburgh.
And did you tell him at that time that it would be a violation of the city charter for him to do business with the city of Edinburgh?
I was not aware of the charter provision about doing business with the city at that time.
And because you were not aware of that provision, you did not inform him that it would be a violation of the city charter, correct?
Of the charter, no.
Did you contact the city council, city attorney, excuse me, to ask him whether or not it was appropriate for Mr. Homer Jasso Jr. to purchase an interest in a company that was interested in doing business with the city?
What I did advise Mr. Hassel, Councilman Hassel, is that he should visit with the city attorney to, if he did purchase a business that was going to do business with the city, he would need to disclose. And to visit with the city attorney on what process that would be to disclose his ownership of a business that was going to do business with the city.
So you believe, Mr. Hinojosa, that it was sufficient enough for him merely to disclose his interest with this company that was either doing business or interested in doing business with the city, correct?
Yes.
And you felt that was enough to satisfy his obligations as a city council member?
Yes, sir.
Now, did you ever visit with Mr. Hasso and the city attorney on this issue?
I don't recall us all three meeting to discuss this.
Did you ever assist Mr. Hasso in obtaining disclosure forms?
I visited with the city attorney. I believe I spoke to the city attorney at the time, Rick Palacios, and I did visit with the assistant city attorney, Chris Palacios, and said, please, to visit with Councilman Hasso about disclosing.
Now, after your discussions with the city attorney, the assistant city attorney, did any of them advise you that it would be a violation for any council member to do or transact any type of business with the city?
We didn't discuss that.
Did anybody advise you that it was a violation?
No.
When did you become aware that the conduct of any council member doing business with the city is a violation of the city charter?
I think it was either in January 2016, approximately that date.
January of 2016?
17.
17. So that wouldn't be until after Mr. Hassel was already doing some business with the city that you even become aware that that conduct is prohibited by charter, correct?
I wasn't even aware that the councilman was doing business with the city until January 2017. After I had the discussion with him about disclosing, I didn't follow up to see whether or not he did. I didn't even know if the company actually was created.
But he was questioning, and he was asking some guidance from you with regard to his interest in this business, and that business doing transactions with the city.
True.
And you assisted him in some way, at least in obtaining disclosure forms so that he could disclose that interest to the city council, correct?
Yes.
And again, you didn't learn that that would be a violation until way after that, sometime in January of
In
2017.
January of 2017.
Now, after January 2017, do you know if Homer retained or what he did in response to learning that it was a violation of the charter to conduct business with the city of Edinburg?
I think once he became aware of it, he advised city council that he was going to sell his interest in the company, and that actually he wanted the contract to be terminated.
So, to the best of your knowledge, when he finds out about this, your understanding is that he then in turn wanted to withdraw his interest in this company and directed the city of Edinburg to void that contract.
Correct.
You felt that that was the appropriate conduct?
Obviously, yes.
Do you feel that Mr. Homer Hasso Jr. was trying to conceal his interest in this company
At what time?
at any time?
Well, he advised me, I guess back in July, that he was interested in doing business with the city, and at that time, I told him he needed to disclose. When it became apparent in January that there was a charter provision that did not allow council members to do business with the city, at that time, he was advised that he needed to terminate the company or terminate the contract.
When he approaches you in June or July about his potential interest in this company, did he express to you that he was attempting to conceal this interest?
No,
Did it appear to you that he was attempting to conceal this interest?
no,
Now, you are aware that this inquiry or the hearing into this issue has been brought before the city council before, correct?
yes,
Now, after the first time this was set on the agenda for the city council, were you ever approached and asked whether or not Mr. Jasso contacted you regarding his interest in this business?
yes,
And you informed them that he had approached you to disclose this interest?
yes.
Now, this has been set again, correct?
I'm sorry?
We're now here back again on the same issue, correct?
It's the same issue. I mean, as far as when he disclosed and how did he advise me, yes.
Have you been interviewed after the second time this has been brought forth before this council for inquiry?
What?
Have you been interviewed? Now that we've brought this back to the city council and it's been approved for inquiry, were you interviewed in response to that?
I was asked by the city attorney, when I learned from Mr. Hassel when he was planning on taking care of this business. Yes.
Now, your duties as a city manager, do you review the agenda packet prior to city council meetings?
Yes, I do.
Now, between the first time this was set before this council and now, are you aware of any new information that has been disclosed or produced relevant to this issue?
No,
Pass the witness.
Mr. Nojose, you're not an attorney, are you?
no,
As I understand, the first time you were aware that Mr. Jasso was interested in the tire business was in July of 2016?
correct.
Right. Did he at that time disclose to you that he was already doing business with the city?
No,
I'm going to object. That, again, assumes facts that are not before this council.
Ruled.
The documents that you've seen during this proceeding, they show that a check was issued to him. You saw that, right?
yes,
Okay. At the time that he spoke with you, did he tell you that he intended to do business with the city?
say again?
In July of 2016, did Councilmember Jasso tell you, I intend to do business with the city?
He said he was, that the company that he was creating would be doing,
Okay. Did he tell you that he was creating a new company or that he was buying out an existing company? What do you recall?
I don't think he told me which one, how he was gonna do that.
Okay. And in terms of disclosing his interest in a business doing work with the city of Edinburg, you told him that he had to file some type of form?
Yes, I told him he needed to disclose.
Right. And the disclosure was made in September?
I'm sorry?
The disclosure was made in September of 2016?
I come to find out that when it was done, but
Okay.
I didn't know that at the time.
And you saw some of the checks that he accepted, they were accepted before he made his disclosure to the city?
Yes, I saw the checks.
Pass the witness.
Mr. Nojose, I know you testified just moments ago that you're not an attorney, correct?
That's correct.
However, you do have a duty to report any potential violations that you do see to an attorney if you see that, correct?
Correct.
Did you, when Homer approached you to discuss his interest in this company, did you feel that there was any potential violations that you needed to report to anybody?
No violation, I just reported that he needed to disclose to the city attorney.
Now, the check that you discussed dated July 28th, or any of these other checks, you don't know the nature of the transactions between Santa Anita Reclamation Project and Santa Anita Recycling,
No, I
do you?
didn't. No, I didn't.
And you don't know the period of time covered for the services provided reflected in those checks, do you?
No.
Let's witness.
Does the city rest? You rest? You rest?
And I would like to call Mr. Homer Hassel.
Raise your right hand, Mr. Hassel. Do you solemnly swear or affirm that you will tell the truth and nothing but the truth, so help me God? Right.
Can you please state your full and complete name?
My name is Homer Hassel Jr.
Mr. Hassel, how long have you been a city council member here in Edinburg?
I've been in city council since May of 2011.
Now, there's been a lot of discussion about your interest in checks and so forth in a company known as Santa Anita Recycling. Do you deny purchasing or obtaining an interest in this company?
No,
Now, do you know approximately the date that you obtained an interest in Santa Anita Recycling?
I know the first time we actually filed a new corporation, LLC, was in April 2nd with the Secretary of State.
At that time, was that company doing business with the city of Edinburg?
No, sir.
Now, that company ended up purchasing another company who was in fact doing business with the city of Edinburgh, correct?
Yes, sir.
Before entering into that transaction, did you approach anybody with the city of Edinburgh about your intent to do the same?
I'm sorry, rephrase?
Before the company that you formed in April, before that company purchased the company that was doing business with the city of Edinburgh, did you inform anybody with the city of Edinburgh about your interest to obtain an interest in that company?
Yes, sir. Met with the, I came up and we had discussions with, I had discussions with the city manager, Richard Hinojosa.
When was that?
The first discussion, we were just walking down, I think it was at a city council meeting, just in the hallway. And he said we can talk, I told him we were just getting started with the process. Told him that we were going to, that was interested in forming a company to buy a business that was already doing business with the city. And I needed to know if I could.
And what did he tell you?
He then let me know that we needed to meet with the legal, and we did so further down the road.
And when you say legal, who do you mean?
Rick Palacios, or Chris Palacios.
Did you, Mr. Hinojosa, and the attorney or the attorney's assistant for the city of Edinburgh ever meet and discuss this matter?
Yes, it was in early July. We met with Chris Palacios. I believe Rick wasn't available. So we were up in the city manager's office, Chris Palacios, myself, and Richard Hinojosa.
And at that point in time, did anybody, any of them, tell you that it was a violation of the Edinburgh City Charter to transact any business with the city?
Absolutely not.
What was told to you?
I was told that the first thing, they need to know all the information about my company and about the company we were buying. And then several days later after that, Rick Palacios approached me. We had a meeting, and he said, "You are perfectly fine with moving forward with this transaction. First of all, it doesn't, it's under $15,000, which means it never goes to the city council for approval. Now, if it ever did go over $15,000, then you would have to abstain from any discussion or voting on that particular item."
And that was the only issue that was addressed with regard to any legal hurdles to obtaining an interest in this company?
Yes, I asked him if there's anything else I needed to do, as far as right now. He said, "No, you're disclosing as it is right now verbally. Once the purchase does get final, that's when you would finalize the new disclosure forms and report to the rest of the city."
Now, when did the company you formed in April finalize its transaction with Santa Anita Reclamation Project, the company that had already been doing business with the city?
I believe that was sometime September, maybe September 20th, September 19th, I'm not too sure.
And that would be at or near the time that you filed your disclosure form?
From what I recall, it was about 2 days, right after we closed on the business. 2 days later, I went and disclosed the proper forms that need to be turned in.
Now, if you were told that if the contract was under 15, you didn't have to abstain from any vote, why did you still decide to go forward and file your disclosure forms?
It was what was told to me to do, that I had to disclose.
Now, you're now aware that it's a violation of the city charter for any council member to transact business with the city, correct?
Right.
When did you first learn of that?
I first learned of that at a city council meeting when Richard Molina pointed out that I was in violation of the city charter. And at that time, I turned to my city manager, city attorney, like, what is he talking about? And Molina went further, or I believe it was Dave, I'm not too sure, but they said that there was provision that didn't allow for any employee or a city council to be doing business with the city.
And after that, did you look into that issue?
Immediately, actually, when we were done with open session, we went to executive, and I gave a directive to the city manager, Richard Hossa, that he will terminate all services with Santa Anita Recycling immediately until we can find out what's going on.
May I approach the witness, and I'll give a copy of the document. Mr. Hossa, can you please identify this document?
It is a withdrawal of member of Santa Anita Recycling LLC dated March 8th, signed by me and signed by another member of the company.
And and this document does what?
Basically, at this time, when I found out it was in violation, that's something that I take real seriously, and my integrity is everything. And because we were in violation, I wanted to withdraw my interest in the company. I had a 15% interest in this company with over 300 acres, over $2 million worth of equipment, and from one reason, I didn't want to be associated or being smeared or being saying that I was taking advantage of the city, what have you. So right away, I just withdrew all interest with Santa Anita Recycling right away.
Sure. The same one I gave you.
You have no objection.
Now, when you withdrew your interest in this company, Mr. Hassel, did they buy you out?
No,
Did you receive any compensation in return for your interest in that company?
no, sir.
You just walked away.
I just walked away.
Why?
Well, there was a lot of smear campaigns that were going around and accusing me of stealing from the city, being accused of a lot of different things. And it was like, first of all, that's not me. That's not who I am. That's not what I stand for. And money is not an interest in me that why I do things. It's, I felt like it was a good company. It was going to be cleaning up the environment. And when we found out that it was that we were in violation, I wanted to step away and just say, hey, I want no part of it. I'm willing just to give it all up and move forward.
You think that was the appropriate thing to do?
Absolutely.
Now, you weren't aware of the charter provision.
Absolutely not.
Now, before you finalized your interest in this company, were you aware of that charter provision?
No.
It wasn't until,
Molina pointed it out one night at a city council meeting.
Mr. Hassel, Do you know the date that the company that you had formed on or about April of 2016 completed its purchase of Santa Anita Reclamation?
Okay, what's that again? Sorry?
The company that you formed in April of
Yes.
2016, that company ended up purchasing all the rights in the company that had been doing business with the city, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
When was that transaction finalized or completed?
I want to say sometime September.
May I approach? Have you seen this document that I've marked as Exhibit Number 4?
Yes.
And what is it? Do you know what this document is?
It's a closing documents on the sale of us purchasing Santa Anita Reclamation.
What is the date on this, the first page of this document?
It's September 30th, 2016.
Okay. I'm done.
Can we see? Can I see that?
Yeah, I'll give it back.
Oh.
I'll intend to use it.
Point of order. We had this discussion yesterday, the process by which any cross-examination of Mr. Hassel may or may not, this can be conducted how?
What's that?
Any cross-examination of Mr. Hassel, how will that be conducted?
He's just gonna ask questions the same way you are.
I believe being that Mr. Hassel being a council member, it would be inappropriate for the city attorney to ask him questions as there is a client, attorney-client confidentiality there. And by asking him questions, he would be in violation of that confidentiality.
But he wasn't the attorney at the time that this
But
happened.
he's the attorney now, and that's his client, he's still a council member, and then I would caution you, because it would be a violation, because there is that confidentiality. And typically, again, we do a lot of this work, when we do these inquiries, what we do is that we'll hire out independent counsel so that this conflict doesn't happen and this confidentiality issue doesn't arise, but we're here now.
No, that's
And-
understandable.
And so I would object to any,
I understand where you're coming from, but are you still on contract to be the EDC attorney?
nope,
Are you sure about that?
positive.
Okay.
Yeah, so again, my question still stands, and I would object to any questions by Mr. Gonzalez, and I'm going to instruct my client not to answer any of those
Fine.
questions. Thank you.
I'm not going to ask any questions.
Okay, any more witnesses? No further witnesses. Okay,
Both sides present.
all right.
Both sides present.
Am I done?
Okay, at this time, I need a motion to go into closed executive to wit, discussion and deliberation on inquiry regarding the conduct of Councilmember Homer Hassel Jr. as it relates to Article 17, Section 2 of the City of Edinburg Charter under the authority of Article 5, Section 11. We have a motion by Councilmember Torres and a second by Councilmember Salinas. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed, same sign. That motion carries. You guys will be asked to deliberate in the back. You guys are like the jury, so whenever you're ready, you can come back. I'm not going to go back there with you, so. We ready, Freddie? Okay, the council is back from closed session. I need a motion to reconvene into open.
Second.
That was a motion by Councilmember Torres and a second by Councilmember Salinas. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. That motion carries. We're going to come back out into the open. The city will reconvene in open session and take necessary action and to a vote or final action in reference to discussion and decision of inquiry regarding the conduct of Councilmember Homer Hasso Jr. as it relates to Article 17, Section 2 of the City of Edinburg Charter under the authority of Article 3, Section 4, and Article 5, Section 11. Section 2, personal interests. I want to read this again. No member of the city council or officer or employee of the city shall have a financial interest, direct or indirect, or by reason of ownership of stock in any corporation, in any contract or in the sale to the city or to a contractor supplying the city of any land or rights or interest in any land, material, supplies, or services, or in any manner in which he acts for the city. Any willful violation of this section shall constitute malfeasance in office, and any officer or employee of the city found guilty thereof shall hereby forfeit his or her position. Any violation of this section with knowledge, express, or complied of the person or corporation contracting with the city shall render the contract voidable by the city manager or the city council. At this time, I'm going to take a vote. And it is, do you find Councilmember Homer Hasso is guilty of willfully violating said section of the City of Edinburg Charter in that he was an officer or by reason of ownership and stock in any corporation, in any contract with the city? Each council member shall apply either I do or I do not. So we're going to start on my right. Councilmember David Torres, who's also our Mayor Pro Tem. Do you find that Councilmember Homer Hasso is guilty of willfully violating Article 17, Section 2 of the City of Edinburg Charter, in that he was an officer or by any reason of ownership and stock in any other corporation or contract with the city?
I do.
Let the record show we have one vote for I do. Councilmember Jorge Luis, Coach Salinas, do you find that Councilmember Homer Hasso Jr. is guilty of willfully violating Article 17, Section 2 of the City of Edinburg Charter in that he was an officer or by reason of ownership and stock in any corporation in any contract with the city?
I do.
Let the record show that Councilmember Salinas has voted I do. Councilmember Gilbert Enriquez, do you find that Councilmember Homer Hasso Jr. is guilty of willfully violating Article 17, Section 2 of the City of Edinburg Charter, in that he was an officer or by reason of ownership and stock in any corporation in any contract with the city?
I do.
I also agree, so let the record show that we have a unanimous vote, and I do for guilty for Councilmember Homer Hasso violating the city charter. That will complete our inquiry and our findings of this violation of the city charter. And at this time, I would like to adjourn the meeting, which I don't need a motion. We'll just go ahead and adjourn. couldn't proceed with the next. Yeah, we couldn't proceed with the next item because we got served. We couldn't proceed, David, because we got served. Yeah.
Oh, we're doing really good? Fine, really good, fine.
I'm getting Willie B's, man. I want some barbecue, man. I ordered the 3 meat.
I'll just have a